Well, hey YouTube, thanks for tuning back in. This is Eric again, back in the bike room. Drying off a bit. I went out for a ride today and, well, it's wet here in Northern California. It finally started raining. Went out today and made it to my coffee place in okay conditions, and then it started raining. So still drying out a bit, but while that's happening, let's watch the latest episode in the PBP After Party. Now, last episode we had Anton from Kazakhstan. Great video from him, and thank you again for sending that in. This week we have Tara Flanagan. Now, Tara is a local rider, rides at the Davis Randonneurs, and offers, I think, hopefully a different perspective. She is the first female participant in the series, and did her first PBP this year, successfully completed it. And she has an interesting history. She's a former professional rugby player. Here is Tara's video, and when we get done with that, I'll show you a few pictures. A couple days ago, I did my annual, I call it PTSD, or Post-Turkey and Stuffing Day ride. Something I've been doing every year for about the last 8 or 10 years. Ride from Davis out to San Francisco. It's a 200-kilometer course, about 7,000 feet of climbing. Just a nice day's ride. And I got very lucky this year. Friday was totally dry. Great conditions for the ride, and I'll show you some pictures from that after Tara's video. So with that, let's go into the intro, and then we'll pick up with Tara Flanagan recording actually in Toronto. So here we go.
I'm Tara Flanagan from Alameda, California, speaking to you from Vancouver, Canada, where I'm here for the long weekend. I'd like to share some of my own PBP experience as a first-time PBP rider. And thank you, Eric, for inviting me to be on the after party. Let's go coffee-nooring, and then I'll share some tips. I rode Paris-Brest Paris for the first time in August 2019, and I did finish in time in 89 hours and 3 minutes. And I wanted to share some of my experiences and some of my own PBP tips and things that I learned. So let's start with the high points. For me, the high points of PBP were the start in Rambouillet. It was a little crazy and chaotic. Wasn't quite sure where to line up, but somehow it all worked out. I was in group Q, and I started Sunday night at 7:45, and I eventually found the other group Q people. And as I stood in the queue of hundreds of cyclists in my group, it was really motivational and very emotional to think of the 3 years that I'd put into preparing for PBP had finally come to this point in time where I was ready to start. And hearing so many languages spoken, so many different kinds of people, to look at so many different bikes, it was just incredible. That was a high point. And then we started, off we went. And I'd have to say that a low point was at some point after Ludiac and 200K from Brest. I just was really tired and really struggling, and I had thoughts that maybe I would have to DNF. And I'm not somebody who has a history of DNFing, and so it was a little unusual that that level of a negative thought crept into my mind, but it was certainly a low point, wondering maybe I really wasn't as prepared as I thought I was to finish the ride. But one important PBP tip that Eric had shared and that I remembered and other friends before I left had stressed is just keep moving forward. That you don't have to be that fast to meet your time goals in PBP, but you have to keep moving. And so when crisis arises, if you hit a low point, or something happens, if you just remember to keep moving forward, Let me give you an example of another low point. I reached Brest, I took a shower and a nap, I came back, and in Ludiac it was very late or early in the morning and I was very tired and I needed to sleep. So I decided I would try the buy a cot system where you pay €4 and they wake you at a certain time. I was always dubious about this cot and sleeping system, but everyone assured me that it was a well-worn system and the French knew what they were doing. So I bought a nap for an hour, and in fact I woke up about 4 hours later. Nobody ever came to wake me up. So suddenly my time goals were shot. I was now 3 hours behind my time goals, and I awoke. I saw light creeping in through the gymnasium window of the high school gym where my sleeping mat was, and I thought I can either panic right now or I can find a way to make up 3 hours of time over the next 400K. And that's what I did. I got on my bike and I remembered the goal is to just keep moving forward. And even though I would miss my time cutoffs at maybe the next couple of checkpoints, I thought if I just kept progressively getting further and further ahead or catching up, that I wouldn't be disqualified. So that's what I did. Another high point for me was reaching Brest and crossing the bridge into Brest and the iconic Brest Bridge in the background where everyone takes pictures. I really felt like, okay, if I can make it halfway, I can make it. So that was a real high point for me. Something that I wanted to share about Paris-Brest as a woman rider was to encourage other women to do the ride. You know, it seemed like for every 20 or 30 men, there was one woman, and I think women are grossly underrepresented in this type of event. And I don't know why necessarily, but I have a few tips, you know, for how to navigate that. You have to be very assertive, I think, anyways. As a randonneur, you have to have a plan and stick to your plan. But you also have to, in my experience, don't let people take up more space in an event or on the road or at the facilities than they're entitled to. Let me give you an example. Restroom lines. There's men's restrooms in the world and there's women's restrooms in the world. And when there's 6,500 people riding bicycles and only 1,500 or 1,000 of them are women, it seemed to me that the men wanted to take over the women's restrooms as well. And I am not that fast a rider. I was not willing to wait in line in a women's restroom line behind 20 men. So I would just go up to the front and point if they didn't understand English or they didn't understand my French, and I'd say, sorry guys, it's the women's restroom, you'll have to wait after me. And I would push my way to the front. Some people might find that rude, and I wasn't trying to be rude, but I think that as a woman in a male-dominated event, it's wrong that I would waste time waiting behind men in the women's bathroom. Don't try anything new on an event like PBP, especially when it comes to your food and nutrition. You have to have an eating plan. It is absolutely not going to work to just, in my experience, shove things in your back pocket and continue riding. At some point, you're in such a calorie deficit, you have to sit down and regroup and eat. And so after the first couple of checkpoints, I made a point to stop in the cafeterias. And that's something that I learned from Eric's videos, was to really have a plan for your nutrition intake. For example, if you're not used to eating baguettes and croissants and French type of food 3 meals a day non-stop, don't start that at PBP. Bring your own kind of snacks and things like that, which you can, or practice eating baguettes before the ride. A lot of them, and ham and cheese and the types of foods that will be available to you. But don't try some new hydration product, or don't try taking a bunch of Advil to prevent pain, even though you don't have any, because you're going to get sick. Another tip that I think Eric stressed, and I agree with, is as a visitor, you're a guest in the country of France, and to be a good guest. And for me, I would say that includes learning some rudimentary French. If you don't know French, or you didn't study at school, or even if you did, do a refresher course, because I think it's a great sign of courtesy and respect to attempt to speak with people, the local people who are lovely, in their own language, and to make that effort. I think it's greatly appreciated, and you'll need it. The last tip I would say, the thing that kept me moving and helped me finish my first PBP within my time limits was to remain calm and don't panic. When things happen that you don't anticipate, you can spend a lot of energy stressing about it and freaking out, but that energy that you spend goes nowhere, and it doesn't help you cycle further down the road. At one point I felt my cleat wasn't on my pedal very well, and I looked down to see what the problem was, and my cleat was actually shorn off from the bottom of my shoe and just dangling there, and I didn't have a backup cleat, and I started to try to figure out how I was going to solve the problem, how I was going to duct tape my cleat back to my shoe, and eventually, by good fortune, I found a bike shop and it happened to be open, and they were able to replace my cleat. That was about an hour later. Or at another point, I got lost in the dark of night in a medieval hill town. Myself and another fellow lost track of the signs, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and neither of us had the route at that point on our Garmin's, and so we were lost, and we just had to remain calm and try to figure out a plan, and everything eventually worked out. I'm really glad I did Paris-Brest Paris. I'm very proud of having completed it. Before I became a cyclist, had an extensive athletic career, and this was one of the best things I've ever accomplished, and I'm really proud of myself. But I also recognize, I didn't just do it myself. A lot of people supported me and helped me. My partner came to France and helped me assemble my bike and met me in Brest and gave me emotional support, and friends back home were supportive. And Eric Norris and his PBP tips are super helpful. And another thing that, I don't know if Eric remembers this, but about 3 years ago when I first got into randonneuring, Eric and I were on the same 400K, and at the finish line, Eric came up to me and he said, "Have you ever thought about doing Paris-Brest Paris? I think you'd be really good at it." And that meant a lot to me. Eric didn't know me, but I knew who Eric was. I knew he was a very accomplished randonneur. And for him to say that, to be so positive and supportive, and to say that he saw something in me that could complete PBP, it really helped motivate me, and I'm really appreciative. So that's the last PBP tip that I would share, is be supportive of other people and be encouraging. We're not racing each other, and we're all in it together. So thanks, Eric, and thanks everybody, and see you in 2023.
Well, thank you again, Tara, for sending in that video, and thank you to your partner for doing such a great job editing that down. With that, here's a few pictures, as I mentioned, from my ride a couple days ago. Friday, day after Thanksgiving, annual ride that I do every year. Ended up doing it by myself this year. Usually have a few friends along. Nobody could make it, but it is a great course, something I've enjoyed doing, as I said, for about the last 10 years or so. So here goes, and with that, I will sign off myself. And just encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button down there. It helps YouTube send this out to other people who are interested in this kind of content. And if you want to get notified of my future videos, there's a bell icon. Look around the screen, click on that thing, and it'll tell you when I post more videos, which happens about once a week. So that's it. See you next time. Bye.